Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to sell more books. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from people just like you and from the most successful authors on the planet. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of my new book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Amy Porterfield. I've been waiting for this interview for a long time. I'm so excited for today. Amy, if you haven't heard of her, she's an ex-corporate girl turned online marketing expert. She's the host of a wildly popular podcast. You've probably heard of it. It's called the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. I feel like every time I go into the top business podcast, it's Amy up there. She's also the author of her new book, the New York Times bestseller. It's called 2 Weeks Notice, and she's the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business. And back in her corporate days, she worked with big brands like Harley Davidson, Tony Robbins, a bunch of other cool brands. And now she's teaching people how to make online marketing easy. It can be really complicated. She does a great job of just making it as simple and painless as possible. Today, we're going to talk about her new book, 2 Weeks Notice, behind the scenes of a New York Times bestseller. We're going to learn a lot. She's coming to speak at Author Advantage Live. So this will be a tease for what you have to look forward to there as well. And I'm excited. So Amy, welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
So I guess for starters, I mean, you've been teaching online marketing for a while now. Why a book? What was kind of the spark to actually do a book? And how did you see this book kind of fitting in with your brand and with your business?
So I've been doing this business I have today for 14 years. And about 5 or 6 years in, I thought I should write a book. I've seen all my other peers write books, and I feel like it gives them a lot of clout and puts them on the map and really allows people to know what they're there for, how they add value, how you can work with them. So I saw the value of a book early on, but I just wasn't sure what I would write this book about. And it very much intimidated me, the whole process. I'm not a natural writer. I've never launched anything like a book before. So I kind of just kept pushing it off. And then finally, a few years ago, I thought, this is time it's time. And the reason I thought that is I got really clear on who I wanted to serve. So in my audience, I serve beginner entrepreneurs who are still in their 9-to-5 job, wanting to leave, wanting to build a business. But I also serve those who have already done so and are looking to up level and scale. So I've got two different audiences, but the one that really speaks to me and I have a soft spot for are those beginners who are absolutely clueless on what the heck to do to start a business, because that's exactly where I was. We don't learn this stuff in school. And so I thought I have a story that I could tell in terms of what my journey looked like to build a multi-million-dollar business when I was absolutely clueless and never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be an entrepreneur. So, and I thought I want to start all the way back to you are still in your 9-to-5 job. How do you create a runway? How do you build that business? So when I got clear about that, it all just started to fall into place and I started to write.
Cool. And so do you see the book, I guess, as far as the business wise, is this kind of like the on-ramp to your stuff where people read this, they say, hold up, maybe I should quit this corporate job. And now there's other trainings and stuff I can do with Amy, or how do you see it fitting in with kind of the business as a whole?
Yeah. So the customer journey is very, very important to me and my team members. And so we see it as the very, very top of the funnel. And it actually is probably right beside my podcast. So you having a podcast, you know, cool. The value of a podcast and it bringing in people that you normally would never have access to. And I was hoping my book would do the same. So a $27 book or a free podcast, usually they're coming in from one of those. And then yes, getting them into my world. And I have different courses depending on where you are in your journey. So I wanted an easy entry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess especially, I mean, going from free listener to book buyer, that's not a big leap. And especially, Did you end up doing an audiobook? If so, did you narrate it or did you hire a narrator?
No, I narrated it. And I have to tell you, that was one of the most coolest things I've ever done. As a podcaster, I enjoy that kind of stuff. I live here in Nashville and I got to go into a studio where Dolly Parton and Johnny Cash have recorded. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And so recording my book and just getting it back into my body, I think the best thing I did is I recorded it right before I started launching. So it was like really current and in my body. And I really felt connected to it. Because, you know, when you write a book, a lot of time goes by before that book is actually out in the world. So recording it was a great experience.
And I mean, I know it's only a couple months in, but if you've seen audiobook sales sales be on par with some of the, I don't know if you have sales reports yet. Like, have you really leaned into the audiobook? Or are you leaning more into the physical and ebook? Like, how have you kind of looked at which format to market and which formats really resonated with people?
So I published through Hay House, and they made a decision to not have my audiobook come out probably until about 2 weeks before my actual book came out, like the hard copy. And so what happened was I started launching my book in October and it came out February 21st. So I pre-launched for a long time and I only had the hard copy or the Kindle to go with. And I didn't focus on the Kindle at all. And truth be told, to get on the New York Times bestseller list, you do have to sell a certain amount of hard copy. And so I really put my focus there since the audio wasn't even available anyway. So my hard copy still is surpassing my Audible, but I think it's a timing thing. I think in a few months, we're going to see that Audible take over the hard copy.
That makes a lot of sense. And because is the audiobook inside the deal with Hay House, or that's outside the deal with Hay House?
They have an audio, it's inside the deal with Hay House.
Cool.
And
Got
they
it.
also have an audio app that they use. So there's a few different ways you can get the audio of my book. But yeah, it was inside the contract, which is funny that we're talking about that because I have a really good friend who's I won't name names just because I don't know if she says this publicly, but she's a huge publisher. She has huge books. And she said, don't put your audio book inside the contract. I didn't know any better. So I put it right there in there. And it's worked out fine for me, but I've heard a lot of different things about that.
Yeah, that is, there's two or three, I feel like two or three important and not as it's difficult things to negotiate into a contract. I mean, negotiating your public or your audiobook outside of the contract. Also, one thing that not a lot of people think about that's super relevant to you and I is your author copy, how much they sell them to you for. So if you want to use them in like free plus shipping funnels or and all that stuff, it's a negligible thing that a lot of publishers are like, okay, cool. Not that big of a deal. How many author copies are you really going to buy? But I think a lot of people, they really focus on the advance. It's like, I just want the biggest advance possible. Right. And maybe the highest royalty rate, but there's those kind of little fringe items that can, depending on your circumstances, can pay off pretty well long-term.
I think it's so important the work you do because I was so clueless. Like I should have gone through all your stuff first, to be quite honest. Even though I wasn't self-publishing, you teach some really key things that you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know to even ask about like my copies. I didn't even know that they would negotiate the royalties. Like I knew nothing about stuff like that. And luckily I've been friends with Reed Tracy of Hay House. Our kids went to school together. And so I've been friends with him for a long time and I knew he'd take great care of me. But if you don't know your publisher at all, you don't know if you're being taken advantage or not. So right. The work you do, my friend, is very important, but you already know that.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for saying that. And it seems like they run a really cool business and a really cool publishing company. I know there's a lot of unscrupulous kind of vanity or hybrid publishing companies, or even just traditional publishers. And so it seems like a lot of authors enjoy working with them. Yes. Let me ask, so it's probably too early to tell, and maybe you're just still in recovery mode from this book launch. But when I heard you talking about kind of there's the advanced marketer and then there's the beginner that's quitting their job and that sort of thing. Do you see, is there a bigger picture with future books? Like, do you want to write the advanced marketing book down the road and this was the logical first book or first step, or like, what do you see that looking like?
Well, you're getting me almost 2 months off of a and I'm never writing a book for the rest of my life. But I know that's not true, but I've never had a baby of my own. But if I gave birth, I know a lot of moms are like, I'm never doing that again. And then a couple of years later, they're like, I can't wait to have another baby. I'm pretty sure that's where I will be. But holy cow, that was the most intense thing I've ever gone through. And so I can't even imagine ever writing another book. But when or if I do, I would write to the more advanced student of mine because it was so tricky. I do have two very different audiences, and my bread and butter is I teach people how to take their knowledge and turn it into a digital course. And you can do that as a complete newbie. I've got people who've made amazing money as a newbie, and you could absolutely crush it if you're a little bit more advanced. So my program works for both, and that's why I have both audiences. But writing a book, I cut out a huge portion of my audience. I actually didn't think I'd make the New York Times bestseller list because I knew that my book wasn't for everybody in my audience or those of my peers' audiences when I asked them to promote. So my next book would definitely be for you've been in business for a few years, how to upscale or up level and scale your business.
That's cool. I like the way you're thinking about it too, because a lot of people make the big mistake. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes in books, and you probably see this in digital products as well, is they try to write for everyone.
Yes.
And they try to write this conglomerate book of if you're a beginner and you want to quit your corporate job, but also if you're at six figures and you want to go to 7 and then it's just this kind of jumbled book that isn't really helpful for either audience. And so I think it's really smart that, the riches are in the niches, and you really spoke to that niche with the 2 weeks notice title, with the subtitle, with the focus of the book. I want to talk about kind of behind the scenes of the launch, New York Times bestseller list, all that stuff here in just a second. But can you give maybe the big picture of the 2 weeks notice philosophy that you talk about in the book, and maybe how this philosophy can apply to authors?
Yes. So in the book, I talk about having the courage to go after something really big when you don't have a track record of doing so. We talk about courage over confidence because courage comes way before confidence. Confidence is, I have a proven track record. I know I can do this. Now I'm going to do it even better. We don't have that when we're still in a 9-to-5 job and we want to start a business. And so I talk about building out a runway to leave your 9-to-5 job with full integrity and feel very grounded when you do, in order to make whatever it is your next step work. And then what are the building blocks or the foundational pieces you need to build a solid online business from scratch? So when I'm talking to authors, like right now, the philosophy behind that is allow yourself the time to plan this out. You don't need to write your book in 1 month and get it published and get it out there like that. Like, give yourself a little bit of time in terms of putting together your runway. What is this going to look like? And then building out the foundational pieces so it can be a success. So when I built out my book launch, I had never launched a book before. Some people will say, but Amy, I thought I heard you say you wrote a big yellow Dummies book about Facebook marketing. I was a co-author. I had nothing to do with marketing that book, and it feels like a joke compared to what I just went through with 2 weeks notice. So I don't even count that. I had never really launched a book, and it's different than launching a digital course is what I learned. And so building out the plan, I did a 4-phased launch, and building out those different phases is just like if I were building out my business, how I would do it as well. So there's a lot of overlap. And one thing in my book that will speak directly to authors is building your email list. I cannot imagine being successful with my book without my email list. It was a huge piece of the puzzle. So that's something that I teach in the book that I think a lot of authors would find valuable.
That's really great. And we're very much in alignment on that. Can you talk to me about, so you talked about kind of building, the courage and the confidence and kind of building ahead and not just saying, hey, screw it, I'm going to do everything overnight. Yeah. So are you a proponent of, all right, build up and then put it in 2 weeks notice? Or are you more of a proponent of like, hey, burn the boats, like jump all in and you'll figure it out? Like, what's your thought there as it relates to both business owners and authors who maybe want to use a book to start a business?
I am absolutely a planner. So I am a proponent of let's build this out properly so that we are here for the long haul. There's a reason I've been here for 14 years. There's a reason how long have you been doing what you're doing?
Oh gosh, 8 years, 8 going on 9.
Because you look like you're 16. So I'm not sure, but 8 years is a long time. Like, there's a reason you've been around that long, because I believe putting the time to create the runway, planning this out strategically, I think it's important. And listen, I want it yesterday. Like, something just came up in my business 2 days ago where I want to work with a consultant to help with something in our business, and my team does not have the bandwidth. And they're like, we need to wait a few months. And I'm like, no, we need to have done it yesterday. Yeah. But I respect, having the time, the bandwidth, the planning, all of that. So my book is not about pick up the book, put your 2 weeks notice in and let's figure it out. But definitely let's plan this out and be methodical about it.
Got it. That makes sense. Are you familiar with the Colby test at all?
Yes.
Okay. So it's so interesting, the dichotomy that I'm hearing you talk about here, because it sounds like the planner in you is maybe a high fact finder, but then there's also a lot of elements of what they would call the quick start, which I'm very much the same as well. Just like, all right, let's new idea, new thing. Let's go.
I totally want to do the quick start, but I'm a little bit of a little higher of that fact finder.
Cool. Are those the two highest?
I think so. Yes. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of the order, but absolutely, I think you're right.
I'm the same because it goes fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer. I think is the order of them, and I think I'm the same, which is like high on the fact finder, and then high on the quick start,
It's a
which is
it's a
low on
crazy
everything
world
else.
to live in when you have those be really close to each other. They're always in a battle.
It was like I've got really well researched and thought out ideas that I want to implement immediately.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Ah,
Which is kind of, I don't know, it could be a lot for the people that you're working with.
for sure. Our poor teams.
So yeah, so let's talk about behind the scenes of this New York Times bestseller launch. So you talked about one component, which I think was pretty smart, what Hay House did and what you did with Hay House, which is saying, all right, we're going to focus on print book and the ebook, but even more so than the ebook, mostly the print book.
Yeah.
And we're going to do that for months ahead. So October kind of to February on the pre-sales. And then they didn't even allow or let the audiobook be purchased until it sounds like a couple weeks before
Yeah.
at launch. So you're really focusing for the purposes of the New York Times, you know, it's for people who don't know, it's about 10 to 12,000 units that you need to move in week one to be able to hit the list. They need to be in some sort of, you know, some at local bookstores, some at big bookstores spread across Amazon. There's this whole kind of algorithmic thing. And at the end of the day, just a disclaimer for everyone who is pursuing this as a goal, it's an editorial list.
Yes.
As some of our good friends know, one of our good friends, the mutual connection knows, I mean, he sold more than enough books to be on the list. New York Times kept him off the list for whatever reason. So it's totally editorial.
So maddening. I hear those stories all the time.
They're very frequent.
Yeah.
So I guess
I feel
all
like
those disclaimers out of the way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how did you approach this and what are your thoughts, like kind of reflecting back, like what was the anatomy of that New York Times bestseller launch?
So definitely like I mentioned, I push the hard copy. And what I mean by saying I push the hard copy is in these 4 phases that I did this book launch, I would give different bonuses away depending on what I was promoting. And to get the bonus, you needed to buy the hard copy. And so, of course, they go to a page, enter their information. And it was really, I had to go on an honor system. I wouldn't necessarily know if it's the hard copy. So we just really went on an honor system. And I feel like my audience is very honest, so I really appreciate them. So let me give you an example. One of the best things that I did, because this is my area of expertise, is that I created a digital course. I did a webinar. I sold, I'm using air quotes, sold the digital course. Like I gave it a value. If I ever sold this is how much I charge for it. And I sold the digital course, but then said, but you only need to pay $27. And by paying $27, what you're really doing is you're going to buy my hard copy of my book, come back here, enter your information. I will give you this digital course for free or for $27. And so that's what I did. And I did that 3 different times from October to February 21st. And every time I did it, every time I got closer to the pub date, it did better and better, which kind of blew my mind.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't think everyone needs to do a digital course and a masterclass. I think anyone launching a book needs to ask yourself, where are you your very best? It might be live on stage. It might be live streams. You might have a really good chance, like if you do video sales letters, which I've never done in my life. So if you do really great video sales letters, maybe it's that. Find your core competencies and double down there. I think that's the best advice I could give.
All right, I'm scrambling for the unmute button as I'm taking notes over here. Where are you your best? I love that. That's such a great question. I hope you're loving this episode so far. So if you're serious about writing and publishing your book, we would love to chat with you and help create a custom plan. All right, so all you need to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. Schedule a 45-minute consultation with one of the experts on my team. All right, let's implement what you're learning in this episode and let's see how we can help with your book. Go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. So when you did that digital course launch, you said you did 3 leading up to the book. Was it the same course each time or was it a different course?
The first 2 were. Now, here's the crazy thing. In October, I did it for the first time, and we did like 3 or 4 live webinars. And I was only planning to do that one. That was phase 1 of my book launch. I was just going to do it once. And it did so well that when we went into November and December, we kind of slowed down a little bit with our marketing because of the holidays. And I went to dinner, and Brendan Burchard, I went to Napa and happened to meet with Brendan, and we were sitting at a table, and my other friend Jasmine Starr was there, and they were talking about my book launch. And I told them what I did with the masterclass, and they're like, do it again, do it again. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I didn't even think about doing it again. So in January, I did the exact same thing again. I did 3 more live webinars. It did even better than October. And remember, I'm going for the same list, my email list, and then ads, but we have the same audiences that we always go through with ads. So most of these people had seen it already.
Yeah.
And so then we got close. So it was almost pub time. And I knew I didn't yet have the numbers. Like when you say between 10 and 12, I heard 14 to 20. And I'm like,
okay.
Oh my gosh, I do not have that many sales yet. And so we decided the day before my book came out, we did 1 more masterclass. But this time I did a different product. I had a product that I had retired and wasn't really selling, but it was really good. And it aligned with what I was teaching. So I brought that out of retirement, did 1 more masterclass, sold more on that 1 masterclass than I did the other 2. And I think the secret is the closer you get to pub date, everyone told me this and I didn't know what to believe, you start to see the sales come in faster. So the day before my book published, we had like 2,000 sales come in through 1 masterclass.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it worked really, really well.
And I love the bringing the old product out of retirement. It's like playing a Tom Brady or a Michael Jordan.
Exactly.
Like, all right, you got 1 more in you.
1 more.
So what did you, so you said 2,000 sales from that 1 masterclass. What was the structure of that? Was it, okay, sign up for this online training. It's a webinar. You're obviously really good at webinars. And then the call to action at the end was to purchase the Tom Brady, the previously retired course, and then you get the book for free, or like, how did that work?
Good question. So it was a little tricky for me to like talk about. I had to get comfortable with it. I literally like taught, I delivered on the value, I wowed them. And then I started to sell the digital course, and it was a $297 value. I'd actually sold it for that. So like it really was $297. Actually, you could still buy it on my website. We just took all our funnels down so they could even see that I was selling it, which made it even more valuable. So I said it's $297, but then I said, but to get it, you do not need to pay $297. All you need to do is go purchase the hard copy of my book, come back to this page and enter your information. So they need to buy the book, and then I would send them the digital course.
Cool. And they're just submitting like a screenshot or an order number or something.
Order number. Yep.
Cool. Nice. That's awesome. And so you mentioned earlier, I think if I heard it correctly, you said something about like 4 phases of pre-launch. Yes. Did I hear that right?
Yep.
And so what were I mean, you know the next question.
All right. So let me tell you the phases. So phase 1 was the digital course, the masterclass. And then phase 2 was a VIP ticket to a live virtual event. So what I did is my book came out on a Tuesday. I had a live virtual event on the following Saturday. And I did it up. I went to a studio in, where's Charleston? South or North Carolina?
That's not old song. I went to school in Charleston.
Okay,
it's fun. We're running our Author Advantage Live. We're running probably out of the same studio with
Sage. Through Sage?
Yeah. So
best
that's so funny.
Experience ever. I've used them in the past for live events where I've actually had an audience, but this is the first time I went to their studios where you've got all the screens behind you. Yeah. But more so than anything, they've got that dialed in, and it was the best experience I've ever had. And so I'm so glad you're doing that. So I went to Charleston, did my event there. And so in order to get a VIP ticket to that, which meant you got a live Q&A with me at the end and you got different swag, that was a limited time. So we did like 3 weeks maybe of VIP tickets, and that was in November. And in December, we went a little bit more quiet. And then, so that was phase 2. Phase 3, we brought back the digital course, but that wasn't really part of our phasing. So another thing we did is called the off the record sessions. And I got this idea from Jenna Kutcher, but through Russell Brunson, where I got my friends involved. I interviewed them about leaving their 9-to-5 job, becoming an entrepreneur, very relevant to the book. I interviewed 5 of my friends and then asked them to mail for me about the bonus. And so that that way I was able to go beyond just me. Not all 5 were able to mail, but a few of them did, and it did make a difference. So the off the record sessions was the next phase. That would be phase 3. And then phase 4 was just general admission tickets to my live event as we got closer. So those were the 4 phases. Each of them came with bonuses. Each of them promoted the hard copy of the book. And then in addition to that, I did over 100 interviews. That just about killed me. That was probably the hardest thing. I don't know if I would be able to do that again. That was intense. I didn't know that I would have to talk about the same thing that many times. But here's the thing. We did all these interviews, podcast interviews, and my request was, please have the podcast interview come out the week my book came out. Not everybody could do that, but as close as they could would be great. And the week my book came out, I was everywhere that week. And I don't say that with an ego. I just say that strategically it actually worked, where my PR was out, my podcasts were out. It was a really beautiful thing, because I don't know if your authors have experienced this, but I didn't know what to do the week my book came out. Like, I'm like, what? I've been so busy for 5 months. What am I supposed to do this week? And it just was kind of, I got to enjoy it, which was amazing.
That's cool. And and that just also provides kind of social share content too,
Yes.
which is, all right, this interview dropped, this thing dropped. And so it just feels like there's this echo chamber of so much stuff happening, and the book's everywhere. And to your ideal readers, they're seeing the book on all their favorite podcasts and seeing it on all the podcasts, that kind of stuff. That I really love that 4-phase approach. You said, I was going to ask you about this anyway, because I was really curious. I feel like when I was interviewing, or either I was interviewing Jenna or she was interviewing me, I forget, it was like the week of your live event.
Yeah.
She's just like, oh, I'm going to Charleston. I'm doing this thing with Amy. And I was like, wow, that's really intriguing. The whole virtual event for that. So you said you did it the Saturday after launch. So was this technically still during your launch week or after your launch week?
It technically is in the launch week. So I'm well aware, and I'm sure that you can attest to this. I know that New York Times bestseller list is not the end all be all. And I know that's not why we write books, nor I didn't get started on this journey because that was my only goal. It just became a goal that kind of became like a little bigger than I would have wanted it to. It drove a lot of decisions, but I have a lot of amazing friends that have launched books, and they tell me, like Jamie Kern-Lima wrote the book Believe It, and she did an event the day her book came out. Ed Milet did the same thing the day his book came out, or days before, or something like that. And so there's that type of an event where you get it, you come for free, and then you get to promote your book, and you get a lot of book sales on that day. Or you could do the event as a delivery of a bonus. And I chose the delivery of the bonus because I wanted to get the books secured in time. And Jamie was telling me, God forbid something were to happen on that day that her book came out and she couldn't do that event, she would have been in a pickle right there, because she wouldn't have gotten all those book sales. So she kind of warned me against that. She gave me the pros and cons. So yes, my book. So, and here's the cool thing though, if the book comes out on a Tuesday, you have till Saturday night for them to record the first week of bestseller list. And so that Saturday was the last day. But remember, my event was not selling a book. And I want to talk to you. I'll probably save a little bit about the event for when I'm at your event, but I'll give you a little hint why it was so cool. But after the book came out, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I got to say, okay, my event's almost here. You got to get the book before you can come to the event. So we were heavily promoting the event the week my book came out, which I think was really valuable. So I didn't sell the book at the event. Everyone who was there had the book, but I sold a $37 boot camp that the results of that were incredible. I will save it for when we're at your event. I don't want to give all the good stuff away, but I want to talk about that later because it was a really strategic move for the whole of the business.
Oh, shoot. Boot camp. Show up to Author Advantage Live and to be continued on how that worked.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about reviews, because you've already gotten 350 plus reviews and it hasn't even been 2 months, which I think is pretty incredible. How have anything that's worked well to get so many reviews? And did you do anything as part of the event to drive reviews?
No, but I should have. hindsight, like if I did this all over again, that would be a really great episode. If I were to do this all over again, what would I change? I'm not exactly sure yet, but it's something to think about. I got to figure that out. One thing I would change though is I should have asked for testimonials at that event, and we could have done some fun contest and randomly chose winners based on people doing testimonials. I wish I would have done that. So anyone listening that's going to do an event, think about that. But the reason I have so many testimonials, and we had like 100 right away, is because I also did a book launch team. And so back in, I think, November, we invited only my paying students. So we didn't do it for everyone. And we just invited my paying students to get into a private Facebook group with me up until the week my book launched. And we promised I would do a Q&A. I did a training on how to plan your promotions. And my community team was really engaged in the group, but in exchange, we asked them to promote my book. And because they were part of my community, they were just doing it as a favor. And we had about 1,000 people in that, and you had to actually buy a book before you got into the book launch Facebook group. You had to show that you bought my book. And
cool.
So, but then the first 500 people actually got a galley where they got a physical copy in the mail, which was kind of cool. But we asked them to write reviews, and we gave them examples of reviews. We told them how to post the reviews. They could post their review and get some feedback from the community if they wanted it. So we made reviews a huge part of it. We even asked them to do video reviews, which you could see on Amazon they did. So the day my book came out, they had already read it and left very beautiful reviews. And cool. That helped immensely.
That's really great. That's awesome. One thing, just one tip here that we do that works pretty well that you might do as well is,
please tell me.
It's a short link that goes directly to your review page. That's easy to remember. And so for me, I think it's like publishedbook.com/review, whatever the URL is for your book. But it's a two-part piece is you can mention it on lives, on podcast episodes, on any of that. But then also your team has it very easily to where if anyone ever comments or emails or whatever, and they're like raving about your book, you say, hey, thank you so much. Would you mind copying and pasting that into a review here? And it's just a short link that takes them directly to the Amazon review page. So you just reduce all the friction. And
I am absolutely doing that.
So that along with one thing that we do, I talk about, I think I sent you this book. If not, I'll send you a book. And in the review chapter, we have a review sweeper. It's super simple. It's basically anything related to your book where someone opts in. 21 days later, they get an email. It's like a 3 email sequence. It's like, hey, how are you liking the book? Reply and let me know. And then the team says, hey, thank you so much. Would you mind copying and pasting that into a review here, this short link? And then the final email to
writing notes.
Yeah. But that just, I call it the review sweeper because it just keeps reviews coming in, week after week, month after month. I was on James Altucher's podcast yesterday, and he quoted this stat, which I never heard before, but I found interesting. He said the publisher told him, once you get to 1,300 reviews, your book will sell forever. It's kind of in that perennial best. And I know that's not like an exact science, but just how important reviews are for social proof and for ongoing rankings on Amazon. And so that's why we focus on it so much. Anyways, those two things might be helpful for you.
Okay, good. Because our next big goal is I want to get to 1,000. And so this is going to help immensely. Okay, thank you for that.
I've got like 2 or 3 other recommendations on how to get to 1,000, but we'll talk.
Make sure I read your book.
There's 1 or 2 that aren't in the book that actually they might all be in the book. But hey, we're running out of time. I got a couple questions for you, and then we'll wrap up. How has the book grown the business so far?
Okay, so what we've seen is just a lot of new energy into the business. And I wrote the book to grow the business. So that was literally my goal. And so what we've seen is that boot camp, without giving too much away, we sold 2,000 more boot camps than we actually thought we would, even when we knew we would have new listeners. Like that exploded the excitement around my projects. And then in addition to that, we are seeing people that come into our communities with new excitement, new energy. That's kind of energizing my students who have been around for a long time. And that makes a difference because when I start to promote new things like a coaching program, more people are paying attention. So we're seeing that. We're seeing, of course, our list grow because of it. but I've seen it in my revenue and I've seen it in my list growth.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Amy, last couple questions I have for you is number one, obviously you're speaking at our event, Author Advantage Live for alongside Michael Hyatt, Tiffany Aliche, Hal Elrod, a bunch of awesome folks.
So cool.
For those who haven't heard of it yet, it's a 3-day virtual event. It's so funny running it out of the same studio there in Charleston, but obviously everyone will be attending virtually. What's one thing that people have to look forward to in that talk? And why should they come?
Well, I'll say two things. Number one, we kind of scratched the surface about these 4 phases and what that looked like. I'm really looking forward to drilling down a little bit more on the detail of how that came together. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about planning ahead and how to get this kind of all dialed in, because that's one thing that we knew what it all looked like before we even started. And then also I'll give you lots more details of how I use the event to make over $1 million. So that's the punchline. So I'll tell you kind of how that worked out. So those are just a few things to look forward to.
Holy cow, that's awesome. Well, that's a lot to look forward to. Guys, grab a ticket, authoradvantagelive.com. The event's coming up real quick, and prices on tickets are going up really soon. So grab a ticket, authoradvantagelive.com. Amy, this is amazing. Where can people go? We're getting a bunch of books for people who show up to Author Advantage Live, but where can people go to buy a copy of your book, to find out more about what you're up to, all that good stuff?
Well, thank you so much. So you can buy 2 weeks notice wherever you buy books online or in bookstores. And then I've got a podcast called Online Marketing Made Easy that will kind of get you started in all the things list building and webinars and digital courses and growing your business. So thank you so much for asking.
All right, guys, check out the book. It's called 2 Weeks Notice. As you know, we talk about all the time. It's a 1-year launch, not a 1-week launch. So Amy's obviously had a ton of success with the 1-week launch, but now is participating in this 1-year launch and continuing to promote the book. So let's help her out. Let's grab a copy and it'll help you out in the process if you're looking to put in a 2-week notice or maybe double down on your online business. Amy, can't wait for the talk at Author Advantage Live. Thanks so much.
Looking forward to it, friend. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.